Hello, divine ones. Welcome back. Thank you for stopping by, spending a little time with the real me. I'm gonna call this a thoughts at 3 message because it's 2:50 a.m. So it's close enough to 3 a.m. and I'll probably still be recording past 3 a.m. or going into the 3 a.m. hour. So this is a very rare thoughts at 3 message that I'm sharing with you today. I wanted to apologize for the quality of the recording, the last recording, the introduction to Crystal's recording. I was very comfortable, and the recording quality kind of took a nosedive like in the middle. I apologize for that. So this time I'm going to record with intention of giving you a clear quality recording. Okay, so in this episode of our crystals and sacred geometry series, or crystal grids series, I want to talk about or share with you some information about crystals and the connection with sacred geometry, or more like explaining what sacred geometry is, so that you can make the connection between the energy of the crystals, that we're using, and connect it with sacred geometry. What is sacred geometry? Why are we using sacred geometry in connection with crystals to bring about manifestation of an intention? Okay, so a crystal grid. What is sacred geometry? And I'm going to, start out by summarizing what we learned about crystal grids, right? So the crystal grid is a tool for manifestation and healing work, and consists of crystals, a sacred geometry pattern, and an intention. So your intention is your goal or your outcome that you desire. The crystals are arranged in the pattern and then charged with the intention. You set your intention through the crystals that are arranged on the pattern. So by combining the elements of sacred geometry, your crystals are focused with intention, and you're able to create a powerful ally or energetic ally for mind and energy work. So why do we call the geometry that's used in a crystal grid sacred? Well, because life and creation itself is sacred, and the geometric shapes of sacred geometry, they're a type of blueprint or code for life. So like drawings, or that are created by an architect for building plans. Okay, so generally speaking, sacred geometry is a mathematical formula that creation, life itself, follows and embodies. Where is sacred geometry found? Well, until you study it more closely, and we don't have the time or the resources to get into in depth, right? So I'm really scratching the surface here, sharing with you a very general idea of what sacred geometry is. But until you study it more in depth, sacred geometry can seem hidden or difficult to notice. But we also call it fundamental geometry because it represents the building blocks of our universe. So the most simple answer to the question of where can you find sacred geometry, it's almost everywhere in nature. So there are countless examples of sacred and fundamental geometry in nature, and they all point to a definite order behind the manifestation of the physical from the non-physical, so also known as manifestation. Backwards actually. So in reverse, manifestation in reverse. So the geometric shapes in nature, they all, behind the manifestation of the physical from the non-physical. Well, it's not backwards. That's manifestation, right? Where you're bringing your intention into physical form, that is manifestation. So geometry is in nature, and all of the sacred and fundamental geometry in nature all point to manifestation. Does that make sense? I hope it does. All right. So for example, a tiny geometric expression of a snowflake, or the double helix shape of human DNA, and even the sun's helical orbit around the center of our galaxy. I think it's the pattern. Yeah, the helix orbit, the pattern of the orbit, right, is considered a sacred geometrical shape. Right? It could get complicated. I confuse myself sometimes. I have to keep it all straight. Well, okay, so Albert Einstein has a quote about look deep into nature and then you will understand everything better. So Albert Einstein's quote makes a connection between nature and, basically like the human concept of life. So symbols and geometry in history. So when you think about a sacred geometrical shape, it is a symbol in itself, right? And the geometry is used or applied to create that shape. So symbols and geometry in history, there's strong evidence that humankind has felt the significance of symbols and geometry since the dawn of time. So when you think about the pyramids and you think about Stonehenge, et cetera, there's geometry behind that, behind the shapes and the configuration of those shapes to create, to build. Well, it's almost as if something deep within us inherently knows that symbols and sacred geometry contain a link to deeper truths about reality. So, and we have sought ways to harness this connection primarily through a very natural human expression, which is art. So you could say that art and creativity has served as a link to divinity for us. Okay, so here's, for some of our, for the spiritual collective, connecting our practices and our belief system to, the universe, through nature and that kind of thing is all the end, point. The whole point of it all is to have a connection to the Most High God Divine. Okay. And there are many, in one of my introductory videos, messages that I shared on this channel, I spoke about, the many pathways and tools and resources that they're divine gifts. So divination is a gift, but divination is a very, very general term for all of the tools and resources, gifts and blessings that, have been bestowed upon us as human beings. If we so choose to tap in or use these gifts and resources, then you're basically practicing spirituality. Okay, so for our religious collective, the connection to your, to the divine, to God, is art and creativity, right? It's basically like a portal, like a connection, a link to divinity for us, right? So the use of a crystal grid in itself is a divination tool that is used for a link, I don't know if I'm explaining this correctly, but it's a divination tool that we've been blessed with, right? It's connection to the universe, and therefore a connection to God, to our God, right? Okay, hopefully I'm explaining this clearly, crystal clearly. Sorry, I had to say it. So crystal grids themselves are a type of artistic expression in terms of the colors, the shapes, and forms that they bring together. So let's talk about an example of one very common sacred geometrical shape is the flower of life. So the flower of life, it's an important symbol found and engraved on pillars at the Temple of Osiris in Egypt. So the pillars themselves go back more than 5,000 years. And then while the exact date of when the powerful geometric pattern was engraved on them isn't certain, there is a strong evidence that points to it having been placed there quite early in the history of the temple. So the ancient people, our ancient ancestors, people who used these geometric shapes at their sacred sites, they must have done so with deep intention. And, the honor and the respect that comes into play when we talk about our ancestors comes from, their, earlier on in the human existence, right? When we, even beyond biblical times, right? What I'm saying is that our ancient ancestors had a much closer connection to the Most High God Divine, right? They didn't have, they had to connect to, through divinity, those tools that were provided to them, and they had to discover those tools and apply them applicably to, their source, which is God. Their spirituality it goes way further back than our most recent developments of religion. And so in a way, spirituality is going way back further before established religion as we know it. Okay, so spirituality has been around a lot longer than our very modern understanding of religion. Not to negate religion or anything like that, because also if you know me or you review some of my earlier video messages, I speak about omonism because I am an omonist. So I understand religion. I grew up in a religious home and, practicing Christianity. So I have a full understanding. I am Christ conscious. I am saved, right? So my soul, my heart belongs to Jesus Christ. And I definitely believe that Jesus was a prophet, is still alive spiritually. So I say is, because he's risen. So, and we know that spirituality and religion, there are many efforts to separate, the practices and cause a divide. But my belief system combines religion and spirituality. And I do so through means like what I'm explaining here today, right? So I had to stop and give some respect and touch on our ancient ancestors, and how they set a foundation for us, a pathway, a blueprint, like a map, if you will. They left behind, many clues for us to connect the dots and, find our way. And a lot of us, many of us in the collective are now finding our way back and, keeping our religious teachings in keeping, those principles, right? We're not negating or abandoning religious teachings or what we, learned, right? It's combined. It's all, it's expansion is what it is. It's expansion to incorporate spirituality into our most recent religious understanding, teaching, principles, etc., so that we can advance in the age of Aquarius is what this is all about in a nutshell. We'll talk about that in another session, message, whatever you want to call it, that I'm doing here. Another sharing. Yeah, that's a good word, sharing. We'll talk about combining religion and spirituality in another sharing. I like that. In summary, sacred geometry is the expression of creation in the universe, the building blocks to life. The sacred patterns exist naturally, like all around us, and humans have been drawing sacred geometry patterns since the beginning of history. The platonic solids themselves, sacred geometry, are tied to the elements and universal energy or divine source. So now imagine taking these incredible patterns and combining them with the power of crystals, and you have a crystal grid. Makes sense? If not, then I suggest you listen to this recording again because I'm trying to get what's in my head out, and what I've learned and share it with you. So hopefully I'm doing a halfway decent job of that. All right, that's all I have for you today. In the next sharing, I will talk more about the different sacred geometrical shapes. Okay, that's all I have for you. Love, talk soon. Bye.